How's it going, everybody, and welcome to How Good Is It Really? My name is Jeremiah.
I'm Luke.
And today we were talking about 1979's Alien. Okay.
When's the last time you watched Alien?
Yesterday.
Okay. When's the last time?
It was.
When's the last time before having watched it for the purposes of this review?
I do not know.
Okay, so
I have
significant
seen
amount
it.
of time then.
I have seen it.
Okay.
I do not know when. So I'm guessing at least probably 10 years since I've seen it.
Okay. Was that the first time you'd ever watched it?
Yes, I've only ever seen it once all the way through.
Okay.
Prior to
And did you watch the director's cut that I bought so that we could watch on Amazon?
Yeah,
Prime?
I watched
was
the
that
director's cut.
Was that the first version you saw, or is this the first time you've seen like the
I don't remember
longer
enough about it
take?
the first time, other than like the major beats to know the difference.
Okay.
So I don't know what was different from
Little
the
tiny
original
things.
cut.
There's like I think 5 minutes of extra footage, but that's about
Okay.
it.
Yes,
this is
and
one
I
of
don't
my-
know enough to.
This is
differentiate the
one
two.
of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time. I'd say it's right up there with Star Wars. Quite
Yeah?
honestly, yeah, for sure. The original Star Wars is in the sense that the aesthetic. I've always been a fan of like crappy like future tech, like the way that Star Wars and Alien really are the first two and only things that really I think of when it comes to my mind, because people are like, oh, Blade Runner's in it. Not really, because you don't see a lot of tech in Blade Runner.
Blade Runner is more dystopian.
Yeah,
in
Blade
feel.
Runner is more like a modern day, just it's a crappy LA, permanently night mode.
It's
yeah,
futuristic, but not
there's
as not
some
as
technology, but not to the extent that there is
Agreed.
in like Alien and Star Wars, which
Agreed.
are science fiction movies. Granted, Alien is a true science fiction, whereas Star Wars I would put more in the like opera, where it's like it has elements of fantasy, it has elements of science fiction in it, it's got elements of classical dramas in it, it has it's got a little bit of everything.
Star Wars seems to treat itself more as an epic in tone,
Yes,
even though
it
it's
does.
not. So
No,
it kind of betrays both in a
Right,
way.
it's a very cleverly designed facade that pulls from so many different genres
Mm-hmm.
to create what the layman sees on the surface from any one of those genres is like, hey, that's a Western in space, or, that's Kurosawa's samurai movies, or whatever, but you don't notice that because it's all on the surface. Love Star Wars, but that's not what we're talking about. Alien has kind of the same aesthetic, but it is wholly and solely a science fiction movie.
Yes.
But it is if I'm mistaken, please comment below, but I am fairly certain this is the first science fiction horror suspense movie. There's possibly like quote unquote like science fiction movies, but when I say science fiction, I'm like talking about like modern science fiction where it's like it happens in space. It happens in some sort
Disagree.
of. Okay. Well, we talk about that.
1960s, The Black Hole.
Black Hole, the Disney movie.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a horror. That's more like a. Man, that's a
It's
hard
not
one.
really horror. Like, I agree. It's not like horror
It's more
in that
like,
way.
dude, that's a dark movie though. Like for a Disney movie, if you guys have never seen Black Hole, it's on Disney Plus right now, and it's not edited. Go watch it and tell me Disney
Where-
had some weird.
I agree.
movies back
It's
in the
not
day.
like a suspense horror like Alien is, for sure. It's not.
Yeah.
But I think it does have it
It
plays
brings
with
up
some of those
interesting
elements.
questions. Yes.
And all, like movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still or something like that.
Would you consider It, the original from like the 50s, to be a science fiction horror?
Which one?
It, the original,
mean
not
The
John.
Thing?
Oh, I'm dumb.
I know what you meant.
Yeah,
but
the Thing. Yes.
Not John Carpenter.
Not
but the
John
original from, like,
Carpenter's
56,
with Kurt Russell and his
which is,
perpetual
I mean,
main of
The
glory.
Thing is great. John Carpenter's The Thing is great.
Oh yeah, no, that's by far my favorite.
I haven't
version
seen
of
the original.
Thing.
I haven't seen the
I've seen
original
that
one.
one too. It's not as good. Significantly not as
Fair,
good.
but like I imagine though, like that also toys with more of your pure science fiction elements, given that working with aliens. But I understand the point
Sure.
where like true science fiction
Space horror,
that
then.
happens
Maybe I should
outside
not.
of doesn't happen
You're
on
right.
Earth.
You're right. I will
Because there's plenty of movies
amend
that,
my statement.
There's plenty of movies that are like futuristic or like alien centric that happen on Earth and are sci-fi by
You're right.
extension,
But not wholly
like even
like-
Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out like 3 years before Alien.
Right, but that's not a horror movie either.
No, but it's not exactly a family feel-good movie.
No, it's not.
So to answer your question, I don't know if this,
It's more
this
like
might
space
be the
horror.
original.
It's more like space horror. It's definitely the movie that spawned 1,000 ripoffs. We talked
Yeah.
about this last week while we were filming our Stranger Things finale, and we
Yeah,
were
I
talking
didn't-
about how Alien, how many movies we've seen.
Either during
That
or
were-
after. I don't know if it was during the episode or if it was just after.
It was after. It was just we were
But
talking.
we were
about
talking
after.
about it afterwards,
and
yeah.
we were talking about how we were shocked actually at how many movies we'd both seen that were like, "Yep, that was an Alien knockoff," and this one was an Alien knockoff.
Yeah.
This one was Alien inspired, and Ridley Scott really spawned a generation. Quite literally, a generation. I would even go so far as to say that like James Cameron's early work was very much inspired by H.R. Geiger. I don't know.
Geiger, I believe.
He's passed away now. One of the most, I would say, influential horror set designers. Like his artwork for Alien is haunting. Like it's really dark, really esoteric, trippy looking stuff, and they really brought that to life in the derelict on LV-426, which is the planet that they arrive at in the Alien movie. Just trying to give like a little bit of background here, like directors and things like that. But Ridley Scott is really good at bringing those like weird, just out of the middle of nowhere films to life. And
Yeah.
I don't know what inspired him to make this movie or why he thought this was going to be a thing. It's not inspired by a book or anything. It's just like a completely
interesting.
original story, and damn, is it good! Like genuinely, I really love this movie, but I think that for what it is so unique because it takes the elements of like a science fiction adventure movie, a purely science fiction movie in the same vein as like Star Trek with the technology and the in-universe like rules of like how everything operates is
Right.
very constrained by the physical limitations of bureaucracy and the technology. Whereas Star Wars is less constrained by that. Like, yeah, those rules exist, but they're more there as a peripheral rather than like the sole focus of the thing.
Sure.
Which is science fiction usually either plays with that to some extent, but Alien for sure has a pure science fiction aesthetic to it that they really go all out to try to make that the centerpiece, and I love that. I really do. I love the spaceships. I love the crappy DOS, super loud dial-up internet effects. The computer that literally takes an entire room. The androids, all that stuff is just. I think that science fiction has really strayed away from what first drew people to that in the first place, and I think those classic elements really have. There's money on the table. If I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for somebody to finally figure out that they just need to make science fiction movies in the way that like the science fiction trend was going in the 70s and 80s, where everything was a more lived-in, more clunky, very like itemized. It was less digital. Everything was analog. Everything was physical, and so there was tons of cool set pieces and props and costumes. And science fiction today is like, yeah, slap a green screen on that thing
Yeah.
and run
Well,
everything in 10K and
I agree with
Woo!
you, like in part.
like Interstellar is a lot of people love that movie. One of my really good friends loves Interstellar. I love that movie too, but I think Interstellar, as compared to Alien, is not as good a science fiction movie. And I don't mean the story. I think Interstellar's story is superior, but I think that in the acting. But I think that the set and the aesthetic of it is dismal by comparison. Like, it's bland. It just looks like I don't know. It's like Apple. You know exactly what you're going for. You know exactly what you're getting. It's sleek. It works every time you press the button, and it does nothing to wow you other than the price tag, which goes up every
I mean,
generation.
there's nothing inherently wrong with that.
No, there's not. But do you see the point I'm trying to make? Like, there's nothing about it that is original. Everything is just like a carbon copy of like, how can we make this more streamlined and more digital and less tangible?
I mean, the only reason science fiction movies were more analog in the 70s because
Everything
technology
was.
actually more analog in the 70s.
Agreed.
The only reason it's more sleek now is because, well, things are actually more sleek now. So you're just doing a
100%,
hyper realized version of the technology that you actually have and trying to imagine what that would be like going forward.
We're just going to get to the point where like everybody's going to be sitting in theaters with like VR headsets. We're just going to like go through interactive movies.
I still can't do VR.
I can't either. I've tried it. It just looks like somebody put a TV screen too close to my face.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
I can't get into it. Anyway, let's actually get into talking about...
All right, cool. So
about Alien.
Alien basically takes place in deep space with the Nostromo. Heckin' cool name for a ship, by the way. Like the Alien franchise is like nailed it with starship names. But the Nostromo is a deep space mining platform, and you have a crew of, I think it's 5 or 6.
It's like 6 or 7.
Is it 6 crew members?
7.
The 2 technicians, the whiny chick, Sigourney Weaver's character,
Because you have the 2 techs.
John Hurt's character. Yeah, 6. It is 6. That's everybody. The 2 chicks, the 2 engineers, the captain, and 7.
And
You're
Kate
right.
and Ash.
It's 7. Okay, so it's group 7.
Yeah.
And they are basically all brought out of deep storage, like deep sleep, because FTL drives, faster than light drives, have not been invented yet, or maybe they have been and it's still really slow. I couldn't really tell. But
cryosleep is the thing.
Yeah, cryosleep is a thing to keep people from aging, obviously, which we're not going to get into that.
And
but
to keep
it
you
is,
in like suspended animation, so like,
right,
you
so
just
you don't
sleep for
age
10 months.
Die, rather than it's like, 20-year journey literally takes 20 years for the ship. It doesn't take 20 years for you anyway. They are coming back, get woke up by the computer, which tells them that they need to respond to a distress signal on LV-426, which is the name of a basically a
planetoid.
Yeah, it
as
is
they refer to it.
It's unexplored, but it has been mapped geologically, and it was just given a
designation
number, essentially, LV-426, and they were brought out to storage to go check it out. So they pretty much all complain about what the 2 engineers are complaining about, like, hey, we're gonna get like a cut of this and whatnot. And they go through this big long spiel about cuts and shares, and then basically the android is the ultimate killjoy, wet blanket, and goes like, well, if you don't participate, you get no money for anything, so you pretty much have to. Yeah. So they all go down and they find the Horseshoe derelict ship, which again is part of H.R. Giger's original artwork designs. I mean, this stuff is like really trippy. Never seen Alien. You will never see anything else like it. The organic, weird, just claustrophobic sets are really interesting. From the perspective of nothing else had ever been shot like this before. The set, no, there is nothing else like this. I've watched a lot of crappy like science fiction B movies from the 50s, where everybody basically was just like recycled like smoking ads with like white families, and then you had like the officer dude, and then the bad guy, and then like the giant bug monster. And then the 60s really just like was like half naked women, because apparently that constitutes science fiction to some extent for some reason, I don't know. And then they moved into the 70s, where they really started to take it more serious, if I can say that. But I definitely have never seen another science fiction movie with this level of set design. I think that is my favorite part about Alien, is just how freaking real everything looks. Like, there is no point in this movie where I was like, I know exactly what they did there, and it's fake as hell. Like, it never struck me that way, not once.
No?
No, not once. Did you see anything that struck you that way, where you were like, man, this looks really stupid and fake?
No, not that I can recall when it comes to like the set design. Okay, but there was some stuff in the set design. It's like, okay, this is stupid.
Okay, let's talk about that then, because we brought it up. So, the ship
it's
or
going
the
to sound
planet?
stupid, but it's not.
Okay, all right.
Like, it actually does not make sense. I
All right,
can't
I'll hear
find
you
any
out.
logical way for this to make sense.
Okay.
So multiple times.
I will defend Alien. This is one of my favorite movies.
Okay,
So
so
give me a
multiple
chance to
times
defend
throughout the
this.
movie,
Okay.
we see this kind of happening, and I understand that it's something that like can happen, but it's never explained.
Okay. What is
Not
this
that it needs
unexplained
to,
thing?
and so, and it happens as well in probably the most prominent part. It happens is when they're landed on the thing.
LV-426.
Yeah, that. And they've gone off to see the ship, and then
Right.
Ripley goes down to check on Parker and other dude.
Yes.
Two engineers that are doing the repairs and stuff.
Right.
She goes down and they're like talking back and forth with each other.
Right.
And the dude has like a valve open, so the air is just blowing and like they can't hear us. They're just like,
Yeah, pissing her off really
Yeah.
for no reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
So they do that. What gas is he venting?
I don't think it really was explained. I think it might just be like a pressure vent to relieve like some sort of excess pressure somehow, some way from like maybe the landing.
'Cause he
or
just
venting
leaves it on?
atmosphere.
Turns back off, turns back on.
Yeah,
turns
yeah.
back off, and we see stuff like that happen where they're intentionally venting something. Like if it's oxygen, well, that's actually your oxygen.
It's probably
and
just
you can't
like
do that.
pressure release valves because they're in deep space, and so
That
the
was
ship
one
is-
thing that bothered me is like you see it them doing it intentional multiple times,
Right.
And then just kind of like I don't know.
That's
It's just
part of the-
something that I bumped into where it's like,
And this is why it's
never
not-
explained. It doesn't have to be explained,
okay.
but I can't think of any logical reason for that to
I
happen.
think the reason for it is because it's part of the science fiction aesthetic. Like you're not meant to be given.
Like
a
they did it
reason.
because it was cool.
Yeah, it was. But not only that, I think that if you think about it, and I have from watching it, because I've had the same question, like, why did he do that? And my
Yeah.
thought to that was that because they're in a pressurized, like, bulkhead ship, like a submarine, essentially, where you have negative pressure outside the hull and you have pressure inside, because obviously if there wasn't, we would all die. So they are venting and re-equalizing pressure within this giant ship, and I think it's part of that crappy 70s like
Maybe.
tech where it's like everything is analog, so you have to go physically turn the knob in order to pressurize the bulkhead for this portion of the ship, because you can't just go, hey Siri, what's the pressure in this okay, fix it. Like it doesn't work that way. That's my answer to that.
So
I could be totally off base, completely wrong. I also don't think it matters because it's just part of that
It
science
doesn't?
fiction aesthetic.
it's just, well,
Why is it there? Why does it do that?
yeah, it doesn't matter, doesn't really affect anything. But I don't like it when movies do something
And then don't give
just
you a
because it's
reason.
cool.
Yeah.
And don't have it make sense. Like you can have it make sense. And like I've seen a couple movies like that recently where they did a thing and it's clear like, okay, you're just trying to do a cool thing, but you're ignoring the rest of the movie. Like you're just
Like
doing
you went out of your way to like type in something and the computer makes a noise and does something, and you're like meant to
Yeah.
be like it's meant to
just
give
for
the
the sake
illusion
of doing the thing, and it doesn't really make sense with what's happening.
Yeah, it's meant to
So-
give the viewer the impression that this world has life to it and that people are doing something other than just
And
acting.
I would argue your point that no, the the mother does automatically regulate any pressurization within the ship that needs to happen because they are all in cryosleep.
Right, but if that room is hermetically sealed, then it wouldn't necessarily need
Not
to
for
be that
oxygen
way.
purposes, but you would like you wouldn't need to oxygenate the rest of
Right, like how
the
would you
ship,
get to the rest of the ship in order? That's a good point. That's a good
But
point.
some of it has to be.
I don't know.
Like, it just has to be.
I know they said they were performing repairs
Mm-hmm.
because they landed funky and when like the landing gear got like crunched in the
Yeah.
landing.
Yeah, and babble, mumbo, jumbo, this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
which
that's literally how it
science,
goes.
Science
They-
fictiony stuff, I'm fine with that because it's like you don't have to explain every little detail,
Right.
Because, well, you landed wrong, it broke something, now you have to repair it. I don't need to know the technicalities. I can buy that.
Right.
Suspension of disbelief allows me to go
With
that.
the exception of that, because I will give it to you, there's really no reason or explanation given for that. Was there anything else that stood out to you? Like they're just doing it because they're doing the thing.
So, like, once you actually watch the movie, it becomes clear that, Ash is the android, obviously, and he has
Yes.
a completely separate agenda from everybody
Shocker!
else.
The android is the bad guy.
Well, and he's not the bad guy. The company is the bad guy.
It's true.
Ash is just
Programmed
a
to
programmed
be an
agent
a-hole.
of the. He's just essentially another computer
Yeah, he's just
that
programmed
is
to
designed to carry out these orders. Like
Right.
it's not
And
really
he has no
him doing
limitations.
something of nefarious purposes. Like
I think the
you know what I
best,
mean?
yeah, and I think the movie that I often reference when it comes to androids and how they should react in relation to human beings is iRobot, with the 3 laws. How a robot
Okay.
should do no harm to a human being, or by omission of action allow a human to be
being,
harmed.
yep.
And then the third is that they can't stand by and allow a human to be harmed?
No, because that falls under rule number 2. I think it's they cannot lie to a human.
That's right. They can't lie. So there's
They can't directly harm. They can't commit any action that would cause a human to come to harm, and they cannot lie.
right.
I believe those are the 3 laws.
I mean, that's an amazing like philosophical premise right there. If you think about like how
iRobot's underrated, I think.
dude, iRobot is an amazing
movie. Doesn't get enough credit. I really like iRobot.
It has a young Shia LaBeouf in it as a kid who literally can't curse, which is hilarious.
Stop cussing because
You're
you're not good at it.
That's the best line in that movie. Or you're the dumbest smart person. There's so many infinitely quotable lines.
You are the dumbest smart person.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some great moments. But
Great
one
movie.
other thing that happened in the movie, in Alien, going back to Alien, I'm trying to remember who all was there in the scene because depending on who was there, I either have an issue or don't.
Okay, what scene? And I'll tell you who was there.
But it's curious that nobody brings it up
Okay.
because the person that you would expect to bring it up, I can understand why he doesn't. Ash, the android, is the science officer.
Okay.
So I would expect him not to bring it up,
Okay.
given what we find out later.
So what specifically are you
So
referencing?
once the facehugger lets go of
John Hurt's character.
who is it? What's the character's name? Is it Kane?
Kane, yes.
So because when they first bring him onto the ship, Dallas and Ash are like examining Kane,
Yeah.
and they like put him in like an X-ray bay kind of thing to figure out what the facehugger's doing, and they see that he has like a tube down his throat, like it's breathing for him, it's providing him oxygen. That's
Yeah.
what's keeping him alive. So they know that whatever the facehugger
Is a parasite.
but has gone into him
Yeah.
in some aspect.
Yeah.
I find it interesting because Dallas was there for that. I understand Ash not wanting to, but I find it interesting that nobody else, including Dallas, made the suggestion to X-ray him once he woke up,
Oh.
just because they knew that the being
Like
had
fell off
gone
and
inside
died.
of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, well, you're also talking about a group of people who literally gave 2 craps about company policy in terms of like quarantine.
Well, no, Ash didn't.
They didn't as well. Like,
Well,
all of them
Dallas didn't.
freaked
Dallas
out.
and Lambert.
Yeah, they both lost.
Dallas
their
and
crap.
Lambert were because they were the ones that were outside with Kane. Ash is the one that disobeyed because Ripley was making the choice. So
Yeah, and she had, like-
it wasn't like everybody. It was like those two because they were the ones that were getting left out. But
But
see your
basically, them two, with the exception of the 2 engineers, were they were all stuck outside the ship. They come back. Kane has this like spider-looking thing attached to his face.
yeah, but that was one moment where it's just like it's interesting. Like I can it doesn't. I don't bump into it that much where I can
You're right.
understand the lapse in logic for like people just not thinking
Well,
about
and
it.
that's kind of the beauty
But
of
because
this script.
Dallas was there, he's
He
the one
should
that,
have said
and he's actually
something.
the captain of the ship. He's
Right.
the one that's responsible, and the one as responsible for thinking
Right.
of things, regardless of whether or not he didn't want to be quarantined, which I can understand. Like just basic.
He's a
safety,
lousy- I mean, he's a lousy captain for
He
that
is,
alone.
but he should have thought of that.
He definitely should have. I will say though, it's in keeping with the behavior and character of the characters. Like this movie is very consistent from
With
one
everybody
character to
being
the next.
incompetent.
Oh
which
yes, excessively.
leads the
no, with the exception of the black engineer. Like that dude is just kind of along for the ride.
There are 3 people that are competent.
Yeah, that
Ripley,
are like
Parker, and Ash.
yes. Parker the engineer, Ash the android.
Yeah.
Dallas is he's useless, literally useless. Really, really useless. The
Yeah.
best thing they could have done would be to literally, when they find out that the alien, which is now fully grown, which I'm getting ahead of things, but when the
We're jumping around. It's fine.
facehugger jumps, when the facehugger falls off of Kane, they go to lunch, and then he get the chest burster scene that everybody's seen on YouTube happens, and the little alien runs off. And my wife laughed out loud when that happened because it's kind of funny.
It is.
It like chitters and like literally like just like drifts across the table in like a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't move or anything. It's a limitation of the filming. I think that it's endearing.
Yeah, there's a lot of
But-
stuff in this movie that's a limitation of the filming and technology that was available at the time, and there are a few parts that take you out of it.
I'll still take that over CGI any day because you know what? CGI still looks fake. I don't care how real it is.
Well,
It's not a real prop, and I will always take a movie.
and
with,
I don't mind practical stuff. I'm not talking about the practical stuff.
Okay,
I'm talking
okay.
about the CGI that is used that is bad.
I don't know.
Some of the
if there is any
some of the
CGI.
comping shots they do with the different shots. to
Oh, right.
get the
There, yes, there are some
Those are
weird
bad.
edit points that are
like
a little
when
off.
like there's this one shot
know exactly
early on
which one you're
before they
talking about.
land, and it's a view looking out the
Yes.
front, and so you see space.
yeah,
But you see like the top panel.
yeah.
Of the of their little like
What's
command
the-
station.
what's that? It's
and you
called
see the
a
bottom
matte
bit.
line, where they literally just superimpose like the footage over the rest of the footage and then like
Right.
cut
So
out.
they've I forget the term for it. What I forget what there's a specific term for
I know
it,
what you-
where you're cutting it out and then
Yeah.
pasting the two together, so
Yes.
you're getting the foreground, which is a separate shot from,
Yes.
from the actual from the background,
which is yeah,
which
that-
can be done, has been done very well.
Yes.
You can do that very well. It is not good in this movie.
It's also
those
because the
specific shots.
technology was fairly new at this point. Like, you have to realize the computers were in the stage where floppy disks were cutting edge.
Yeah, but
with
again,
less
like
than
this
like
isn't
100
like
megabytes of storage
they're not,
on them.
This isn't CGI. It's just
No,
like
no,
putting
it's-
two prints together, and it's
This is classic
there were a
filmmaking at its
few-
best.
Well, this isn't classic. This is like
Classic
modern
science.
Renaissance.
Well, I mean, like classic science fiction. I mean, that's what I mean by that. Like, 'cause if I'm talking about like we were talking about before, this is like the Renaissance when like through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like films really took what came before and like did the best they possibly could without the use of computer technology. I would argue that computer tech made everything lazy, including story writing, because they're like, we'll just make everything look good, and no one cares anymore what the dial. Yes, we do. Yes, we absolutely do.
Leaning on it too much is
You
certainly
are
a bad thing.
Yeah,
I agree
I'm
with that.
looking right at you, Marvel. Right, do better. Seriously, your movies lately have been very low tier compared to what came before.
Imagine if you spent $300 million on a movie, but did a lot of practical stuff.
Yeah,
Like, you can do CG,
Dude, could you imagine if Ridley Scott in 1979 had been given that kind of a budget for this film? Like what we would have gotten? Versus...
It would not have been better.
I think it would have. I think it
so.
significantly would have been better because the time involved in making sure that everything was so perfectly mapped out. I mean, you could have taken that and run with it. You could have made 3, 4, 5 movies.
Yeah, but I don't
that kind of a budget.
Well, I don't think more money would have made Alien a better movie. I think
We'll never
I
know.
think where it falters are just the limitations of the filmmaking at the time,
Right.
things that money can't solve.
That's true to a certain extent. I do think, though, that having more money just for more props, more time, because a lot of what comes down to whether or not a movie is good or not is the editing, and a lot of that comes down to how much you can afford to pay the people who are doing the editing. So there isn't necessarily a limitation necessarily when it comes to filming if your edits suck. Good example of that is the original Star Wars movies. Without Marcia, that was her name, right?
I do not know.
Mrs. Lucas, former, she's no longer married to George, but at the time she was married to George, and without her edits, Star Wars would not have been as successful as it was. Star Wars was a mess before it was edited by Mrs. Lucas, basically.
Okay.
And that's just because George was not a filmmaker in the sense that he knew how to make a good story and he knew how to make it look right, but he wasn't an editor and he was a lousy director. Like his directions to Harrison Ford was faster, more intense. When being asked how to like film a scene that has like dialogue and movement, and he's
And
like,
if you've
he's
ever
like, I
heard
don't- I don't
George
know,
talk
faster, more
For
intense.
any amount of time, you automatically understand, like, oh, you're not a people person.
No, he's not. And then when all of the executives like screened the movie at his house, all of them, with the exception of Spielberg and I think one Fox executive, were like, "This is garbage, and we are not paying for it." We were like, "You scammed us. This movie is garbage, and you will never work for us again." Basically. But then his wife stepped in, edited the film. It was amazing. Spielberg believed in him because that's what true friends do, and it was a great movie. Anyway, back to Alien.
Moving on.
You're right. The limitations of the film are not something that money can solve directly. Although I do think that editing, it could have done with a little bit more editing, but that's just nitpicking a nearly perfect movie in my opinion.
I don't know. I don't think you need. I don't think this movie needs to be trimmed down at all.
I think it could have been longer, personally. Some sections, like
Maybe, but like
I'll get to it in a minute.
enjoy. The first thing I noticed about the movie was, and for a lot of Scott's stuff, is it's very atmospheric.
I was just about to say that exact same word.
Like,
the atmosphere of the
he
movie
knows
is
how, like,
nailed it.
And it's consistent all the way through, and has just a slight air of tension, and that is also in part due to the score. I forget who did it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the score for this
I
movie
forget-
is amazing.
It's a very prominent composer. I don't remember his name.
It's not Hans Zimmer.
No. I can't remember. I don't remember who it is, but give him credit to him, because a lot of the atmosphere and tension that is sustained throughout is due to the score.
It's a very
But
haunting score.
the long shots that are held like almost too long.
Yes.
Like just
They
enough.
linger
They
just
linger
long
just
enough.
long enough to make you feel just a little uneasy, which is what they're supposed to do. Like when you
Yes.
linger on a shot, you're supposed to, like it's just not necessarily a trope, but a way of filmmaking for building suspense. Just like there's different shot lengths that you use for thriller and suspense movies versus action movies versus dramas. Like there's different length of shots and types of shots that you use that help to convey that emotion.
Yes. And
And
Ridley Scott really is a master of that. This movie
Yes.
captures the essence of suspense thriller, which I don't know that I'd call it a horror film. I know that it is.
yeah, it can be classified as a horror under the broad umbrella of
It's
horror,
more of a suspense
but it is
thriller,
much
though.
more of a suspenseful film. I wouldn't even call it so much thriller, but
You see the
suspense.
alien like 3 times in this movie. No joke. You see it, I think, I'm trying to remember in my head all the times you see it. Not parts of it, not peripherally. I mean like full-blown shots of the alien are like maybe 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, you see it quite a few times.
But that is it. For a movie that is almost 2 hours long, that predicates itself on this one entity being the sole antithesis, or the what's the antagonist of this film, is the alien. In an incredibly, and this is something I noticed about it, the ship
Okay.
gets more claustrophobic as the movie goes on. The shots and the corridors and the shot compositions, they get smaller and smaller and smaller.
A little bit.
Every shot
exceptions.
every shot with Ripley, as she's running through the ship at the very end, it gets tighter and more confined to give that sense of like there's nowhere to go. Like there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to go. The lighting, the music, it's very intense. Granted, by today's standards, it's a little laughable what they got away with back then
How so?
versus. I just think it's just, I mean, like a 13-year-old kid could watch this and he's probably seen more intense things like watching YouTube for 5 minutes.
Yes, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Like
I'm
there's
just-
nothing to the fault of the movie.
No, I was just bringing up the point that by today's standards, this movie is not intense.
I mean, I don't know.
Like my wife absolutely.
I'm trying to understand like
She's
how
traumatized and hates horrors and thrillers. Will not watch them. I don't care what it is. Like Poltergeist is too intense for my wife. That is a very benign movie. Like Poltergeist is not
Yeah.
scary.
Poltergeist is. Yeah, I wouldn't call it scary. Like it's again one of the movies that's classified as a horror. Under
It's
the
a
broad
mature
umbrella of
movie,
horror.
but like for a 13-year-old kid. Like I watched this movie when I was younger. And
I've seen Poltergeist.
I'm very sensitive to that sort of stuff. Like I'm a very spiritual person, and I don't freak out for no reason. But I absolutely believe in like a spirit world. As a Christian, I believe that it's a real thing. And so
Yeah.
when movies play with like spirits and demons and things like that, it really bothers me. But that movie, yeah, it's fine. Like it's totally fine. And the same thing with this movie, where it's just I can watch it. And my wife,
it's
like,
just an alien.
It's just an alien. Like it's not
an alien.
scary. It's just not. I'm sure for some people it might be, but it's not. The point I'm trying to make is that I don't think that this movie deserves the moniker of being this like super intense horror, because it's really not.
No, it's a suspense horror film.
The suspense you feel is really all from watching the characters themselves as they react to being cut off one by one and then basically picked off. The scene I'm thinking
yeah,
of
the
is when
suspense
Lambert,
they feel at the hand of the xenomorph.
yeah, when Lambert and Parker both die, the way that whole sequence is filmed, there's one really weird shot where the alien kind of like moves like it's in like zero gravity across the room for like half a second, which was a little weird. But the way that they shoot them in that sequence is so claustrophobic, and it gets more so as the film progresses. Where it's not like she's like crawling through like air ducts or anything, but
Not yet.
It definitely lends itself to that sense of being cut off from an escape. And Sigourney Weaver does a very good job of portraying that in this movie. It's one of her, in my opinion, one of the best movies that she ever did. I'm sure people would say that some of her other stuff was better. I think that the first two Alien
I think
movies
it's certainly
were
among
career
the top.
defining. I think those first two movies where she really is like a female action hero. Like I don't know how else to say that.
No, definitely.
And I think that a lot of modern films are trying way too hard to rely on exterior means of motivating us to go watch like female-led movies. They're like, it's a woman and estrogen, and that's why it's a good movie. I don't think you understand. Go watch the original Terminator with I'm going to forget her name now.
I'm thinking.
I'm thinking of the character, not the actress, but in the original Terminator and T2, those are two of the best movies that James Cameron has ever made, and they are both female-led, and they are amazing. And neither one of them relies on the sex of the character to sell the story.
Right.
Female characters are not interesting because they are women. They are interesting because their characters are interesting.
Yeah.
Just the same way that if a male character was written to exclusively rely on male characteristics, it would be a really poorly written and dumb character.
Mm-hmm.
Movies that do that are usually fall into the category of tongue-in-cheek comedies, or they're on the nose for a reason. Like they're trying to draw your attention to the fact that this is not real. Okay,
it is
this
meant to be
funny.
absurd.
This is stupid. Point. I've made my point. Anyway, Sigourney Weaver does a great job in this movie, and I can't stress enough. Like the set design is just fantastic. Like I don't know how they did it. I still don't know. I think I looked into it at one point, and they used part of like a water processing plant, or it was some sort of like dam, I think, or something. And the
set design is fine.
They kind of tricked it out, but I think this is one of the purest examples of a science fiction film done right, where the set really does lend itself like hand in hand with the story, where there's never something that is just out of place that does a thing that you don't know about because reasons. And I love how real everything is, like down to the self-destruct sequence. Like all of it was a physical prop somebody had to go through the effort to make with motors and lights, and it's not simple to do that. Go ahead.
Question. Yes, you in the back. Why does this ship have a self-destruct?
All ships are equipped with some form of like scuttle measures.
Why?
Maritime vessels, to keep usually like opposing parties
Do
from gaining.
maritime rules apply?
I would
to
assume so in this universe. Like what if they have pirates?
Interstellar mining vessels?
If they are owned by a company that mandates their technology not like, if it's proprietary, not fall into like enemy hands, like pirates or like thieves.
Just a question.
I mean, that's why real vessels come with like scuttling measures.
I understand. Yeah, but like, just a question.
I think that's why.
I found
they
it kinda
never.
odd.
They
Like,
never.
it's a refinery.
Like,
why
why
does
does
it
it
have a
have like a
self-destruct?
self-destruct sequence on it?
Especially if like the secondary primary directive of the entire company is to actually search for extraterrestrial life and ensure that it reaches Earth.
Right.
It feels odd.
Yeah, they don't really get into this too much because this is the first film in the franchise. You learn more about it as you watch more of them. Mm-hmm. But they kind of hint at it. And this goes back to the kind of part of the overarching lore, which isn't necessarily permanent or isn't pertinent to this film necessarily, but it is to this series.
Sure.
That the Weyland-Yutani Corporation is not only aware of the alien, but have been actively searching for the alien for hundreds of years. And you find out more about that if you watch the later films and play the games. Alien Isolation, great game. I love it. I've played it through like 5 times. That one has a lot of really great story elements that fill in a lot of missing pieces and help to understand kind of the world that you're in. But basically, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation basically has this secondary, kind of like a fail-safe, basically, where if they run across a distress signal, they disguise it as like, oh, it's just like you might need to go help somebody in need. Oh, and by the way, you'll lose like any rights to whatever you found in your contracted work. Like, you get paid nothing if you ignore this. So it's like a way of like forcing the crews that are under contract to like go and do this thing. Pretty shady, but they disguise it under altruistic motives, like we're just trying to help people. But in reality, it's basically like you're expendable and we just want the life form.
Yep.
Which is exactly what Ash ends up making very clear to Ripley. After she discovers the sub-directive that Mother was hiding from both the captain, Dallas, as well as her as the science officer, which this is a little bit of a plot hole that I've always noticed. Why does Dallas never ask? Because Ripley literally just goes in there and goes, command override, blah, blah, blah. And the computer's like, oh, yeah, you're all going to die because we have this, like, sub-directive and, yeah, you're all expendable. Like, if she could just query the computer and ask for it, it just gives her the answer right there. Why didn't Dallas do that?
Did he know enough to ask that question?
That's a great question, because I know that Ripley finds out about Company Directive XYZ, but I don't remember when she first hears that. If it's from Ash.
It's from Ash.
But Ash doesn't attack her until directly after that.
Right, it's after Dallas has died.
Right. So what I'm trying to figure out is, did Dallas know, and he just didn't know how to, like, address it?
So either Dallas already knew.
Because
and was aware of everything.
Stands to reason that...
Which could make sense. Which
he's
is
even
why
more
he's
of a lousy captain.
And why he's so fine with everything that happens.
Yeah, he definitely should have spaced the android right away.
And why he's so determined to get back on board and not be in quarantined when they're coming back. Because he knows what they found. So that is one option. Or he doesn't know enough to even raise that question yet.
It's possible, but then how did Ripley find out about it? Because like she inherits basically the authorization as the acting captain.
Right. Well, because she goes in seeking clarification on the alien creature.
Oh, I remember what happened. She goes in
asking like Mother for like any information about the alien.
And then it says nothing, and then it gives her
says like it's classified
like 976 or
right,
whatever.
it's like
she goes, 937,
and then she's like inquiries about that.
That's
right.
Where that's how she finds out about it. But what did she go to ask the computer for in the first place?
About the alien, just like how do we kill it? Give me information on how do we destroy this alien, because Ash had been doing some testing on it, so obviously some of that had been logged in the computer just to get information. Is why she
that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Okay,
so I don't think Dallas had any inkling.
He probably had no idea.
Ask.
Nope, I don't think he did. He's a lousy captain. Absolutely dumb. So dumb.
There's a lot of...
He definitely should have just basically been like, oh, it's using the air ducts. We're going to seal everything off. And that's it. That's the end of it. Like, you just literally close all the exits. It can't get out. Problem solved.
Or can it?
Well, if it's using the air ducts to move around and you just block them all
the
off.
air ducts?
Not unless it, like, chews its own, like, arm off to, like, acid through the bulkhead.
It's not strong enough to break through any of the closures?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because the closures aren't actually closures.
Just the little, like, iris apparatuses.
And they don't close all the way.
No, but I don't think the alien was strong enough to, like, open those. That I'm not sure about. Anyway, we don't get to find out because Dallas dies. And I was like, hooray. Anyway, so they all get picked off one by one. Sigourney Weaver survives to the very end. And this is where the director's cut comes into play, because this answers a couple questions that only like the lore nuts really care about.
Okay.
How do the aliens reproduce? Because you don't find out about the Queen until the second movie, which is not Ridley Scott, it's James Cameron.
Right.
And James Cameron introduced the character of the Queen, which basically spawns all the eggs. So if you retroactively apply that to Alien, then there had to have been a queen to lay the eggs that are in the derelict ship in the first place. Mm-hmm. But we see that a chestburster actually killed the architect, yeah, the giant, like...
I guess we don't figure out they're called, like, the architects till, like, 30 years later.
Yeah, but basically, but anyway. The pilot is dead. and you see that like the
pilot of the
exoskeleton
derelict.
has been like ruptured outward, and some sort of alien, basically a form of the alien, killed him.
Mm-hmm.
So we assume that that was either a queen, or if you actually go off of what Ridley Scott, I think, originally had implied, they reproduce asexually, where the more like bugs, where a single xenomorph can take a human being and
Or
then
any
like,
organic life form and use that
to turn into an egg, which will then gestate to become a facehugger, which then propagates more of them. And we see both Dallas and the other...
Dallas and Lambert.
No, not Lambert. It was the guy with the hat. The guy that first got taken. I can't remember his name. He was one of the
Oh,
engineers.
you're right. Yeah,
I don't remember his name.
The other guy, the one that just says all right.
Yeah, that guy. So you basically see both of them in the process of being consumed by like the egg-like things, and like Sigourney Weaver just like she totally nukes them with the fire. And
That part bothered me.
it's probably a little confusing for people that have watched the director because they're like, "What am I looking at?
No.
I don't understand."
Everything made sense.
Right up until she like, for no reason, just goes back to the cargo hold and like is like, "Oh crap, what's going on? Like, why did she go down there in the first place?"
No, like that makes sense.
I missed that.
I'm
why
fine
she went down
with,
there in the first place.
I'm fine with her like moving around, going places, seeing the dudes. You know, getting. They're not dead yet because Dallas asked her to kill him.
Well, the one guy he's clearly dead. Like, there's nothing left. He's literally like decomposing.
That's why I said Dallas isn't dead because Dallas isn't
Okay,
dead. Dallas
fine,
asked her Ripley to kill him.
Yeah.
And she like sparks up the flamethrower like 2-3 passes. Like she does just enough to like burn him, but nothing gets set on fire, and it's so obvious that Dallas would not have died from that.
I think we're meant to just
Like,
assume
we're meant
those
to
are super flamethrowers.
We're meant
with,
to
like,
believe that they
napalm
did, but in either
something.
case, because what she was torching didn't actually light on fire.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like-
why it got cut. Because
it felt weird.
The scene didn't have enough background to give you context for why it was there in the first place. It's arbitrary for her to just go to the cargo hold, which is the opposite direction she would need to go to get to the actual shuttle. Which we know because like we literally see her go from like the main cabin, which is like here, and then she goes down a hallway and goes there, and like the escape shuttle's here. But then she like goes down a set of stairs and like goes back into like the cargo hold. And like, dude, why are you down there? There's nothing down there that you need. Like, why are you down there?
See, but even like again, that didn't bother me.
It
The
bothered
part
me
that bothered me was her killing Dallas.
with a flamethrower that just like singed his eyebrows.
Right, because I don't believe he's dead. I believe you just burned him a little bit, and now he's in even more pain. Still, exactly. Like all you needed to
like-
fix
like
that
a-
scene
like a Rick and
is
Morty.
she like sparks up the flamethrower, does like 3 passes, and then it's a
something
shot
explodes.
on her. You don't even have explosion; you have a shot on her, but it's still completely dark. All you need is backlighting behind the camera
To show that
for
it's
a yellow
on fire.
tint to imply that it's on fire, and you buy it.
Right. Cool.
Lighting could have fixed that entire scene.
Yeah.
And it was badly done.
I think it's just that's why it was taken out, was because they realized
That makes sense.
that
If that sequence was one thing
because
that was
if you
taken
watch
out,
it without that
makes
sequence,
sense.
she literally just goes. It transitions directly from her running back to the cockpit to disable the auto destruct, which
Doesn't work.
doesn't work, and then she immediately goes back down the hallway, grabs the cat, and goes into the escape. That's the sequence of events if you don't watch that scene.
Okay, so yeah, like that not being in the original cut, I agree with. The director's cut, not necessarily the
It's more for the lore
motivations for
junkies.
who's there. That didn't bump into me, but the actual killing of Dallas, I didn't buy.
Right.
But her going to disable the self-destruct. Why?
Because she couldn't get past the alien.
It's a stupid decision. This is the worst.
Right.
This is the
horror movie decisions that characters make.
Yes, this is like
forced tension for us as the audience.
like there is absolutely no like, oh, the alien's there. Let me go back and disable the self-destruct on the ship. The
Hide,
alien's
bro.
still there. Nothing changed.
Like, go hide.
It's trying to manufacture more tension just
Yeah.
for the sake of doing it.
I
because it doesn't
agree.
get disabled. She has to flee anyway. But if the alien's there, like, okay, you run away, it follows you, and then you go back to the shuttle because you still have to escape the alien. If you stay there and
You die
disable
anyway.
the self-destruct, The alien's still there. You're still dead. Like, there's no reason not to do that.
Yeah. That's a manufactured drama point. So
That's poorly done.
that's definitely a cinema sin there for sure.
I did not care for that at all.
That just falls under the classic, like, why do horror movie characters do stupid things that real human beings would not do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where,
That's
like,
just dumb.
maybe somebody can try and make it make sense, but given that the decision solves, like, the only thing, it delays the ship blowing up. Okay, so it gives you more time to kind of deal with the situation. Okay, I can kind of buy that angle, except, like, just go.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It felt weird.
Yeah.
And, the usual trope of the alien, the monster, whatever it is, always being wherever your protagonist goes.
Right. Fair. The ending.
It sounds like don't like the movie.
No, these are
saying
just
a lot
like
of negative things, but like
you just come to expect these from horror
I
films.
really enjoyed the movie. Like, I like it a lot. There was a lot of great stuff. Like I said, the acting, most of the writing, the overarching
It's a cult
story,
classic
the
for a
fact that it
reason.
just I like movies that just do the thing and don't give explanation. And you as the viewer,
There is
suspension
no-
of
yeah.
disbelief should allow you to go
Yeah.
along with things. The problem that I have with what I'm pointing out, where it's like, it takes me out of it. Like, this
Yeah.
is so far beyond that it doesn't make sense.
Nothing's perfect. And I will say, I think you're exactly 100% right. I hate it when Captain Plot Exposition comes along to tell you why they're going to go do a thing. We don't care. Do it. We don't need you to inform us as the audience about what you are about to go do. First of all, we're not stupid, and no one does that in real life. Okay? It doesn't work that way. Like, if you're going to go do something and films are meant to imitate life, it's not like, we are now going to go down this corridor so that we can set this trap up to do this thing, and then you go do it. Just go do it. Like, you don't need to tell us. We understand the motivation. I get why it's there, to explain to the audience the motivation behind what is about to happen. We don't need to have it drawn out. We're not 5. Just do it. And let us come up with our own take on what we're watching. That's what makes it rewatchable.
Okay.
Rant aside.
Second to last thing I had a problem with.
Okay.
I think. What is the purpose of the spacesuit that Ripley puts on at the very end when she's in the, like, escape pod thing?
Well, she depressurizes the cabin and sucks all the air out.
Again, suspension of disbelief. I do not believe that suit would have done anything for her.
It's just meant to be like their version of a astronaut spacesuit,
I get that,
which is like pressurized and everything.
but it's 2 pieces.
I know it's like, it looks like an old school submarine helmet that you put on over like the
It's
actual
there's the
suit
jacket,
itself.
and then there's the helmet that she puts down, and
But there's no like external tanks or anything. I think it's just we're meant to,
or
like,
even
it's
to be
part-
self-contained. Like,
it's
there's
part of
no
the
way
helmet.
that the helmet
Like,
attached
sealed
to the
itself.
suit and
Yeah.
sealed sufficiently to do that.
That's just, I think, part of the whole science fiction thing. But that was clearly why it was there.
It was poorly done.
The suit definitely should have had like some sort of like gasket or
Like,
seal.
I get that maybe it would have been more difficult, but just make it one piece, and then it's
a little bit more.
Then you could
believable.
leave like, oh,
Or a
okay,
lot. Like real astronaut suits, like actual real 1960s, like they actually went to space. Not a conspiracy nut. It actually happened. It literally just locks into place, and it's just like,
yeah.
It
But the
doesn't
problem
have
for
any
me was
exits,
they were
that's it.
just 2 pieces. Like, she puts the suit on, then she puts the helmet on. There's nothing
We're
that
gonna go.
seals.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Like,
You're right. You're
there's
right.
nothing that seals. I didn't.
You're
buy
right.
at all.
I think that's really. I didn't really see anything else that bothered me, other than the arbitrariness of her going to the cargo hold for no freaking reason. The way that the science officer is the worst covert operative ever. But like he functions with the intellect basically of like a 13-year-old kid that has seen like 2 spy movies. Not very.
Who's that?
Ash, the android. Like, he's not very good at what he does. Like, if your job is basically to kill off the crew,
That's
or
why
allow,
they upgraded him and created
pretend
David.
to help. Keep pretending to help. Like, allowing the 3 remaining crew members to like gang up on you because you have like some sort of like psychotic need to kill things.
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
That's a little bit over the top. They explain it in Aliens where he's like, oh yeah, they're just like that model was super twitchy and they had issues.
Yeah,
it was like
new variants,
like psychotic,
and then it still
murderous
didn't work.
tendencies,
So eventually they made new variants, and we got David in later films,
which is still psychotic and kills people.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
Oh,
Wayland
man.
never quite got it right.
no, or it's somebody's got like a thing for making murderous androids, which the only one that has ever like been a good android is Bishop.
Okay.
Like truly like fulfilled his role as
Again,
like allowing
only
no
saw
harm to
it
come to the
one
humans.
time. It's been a while. It's been a while.
Go watch
Yeah.
Aliens, the second one. It's really good.
No, okay.
I'll make you review it at some point.
Okay. Last thing that
All
I
right.
saw was just like, why, like just why is Ripley's underwear 3 sizes too small?
I pointed that out. I was watching them with my wife. I'm like, honey, why is it so small? And
Yeah.
the only answer I can think of is that
Why?
maybe it was like a science fiction thing. Again, we're coming off the 60s.
No, you can't blame this on science fiction thing. Like,
oh God,
like
that's just an awkward
it just
question.
why?
But yeah,
It
why?
just didn't fit. It did not fit
No.
at all.
But then again, George Lucas also seemed to think that bras didn't exist in space.
Yeah.
Science fiction has like a weird obsession with women's underwear. So the 60s version, and I really do blame
Like the fact
60s
that
for
she's
this.
taking her clothes off because she plans on going back into like cryosleep or something.
That
I
alone,
buy. Okay,
okay,
cool.
fine, maybe.
I get that, but what she's wearing just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It's so freaking small.
It's so bad.
Um,
it's so bad.
Yeah. I really genuinely think that the reason for that is because the 1960s was obsessed
This was
with
79.
like soft porn and science fiction. Like
Yeah, they had to try and fit some, but like you,
there are some really, and I'm not gonna name names because you don't watch it. It will
weird.
legitimately scar you. Don't watch them. They're awful. They're truly awful. But the late 60s and early 70s were littered. Really, actually, up until like the mid 80s, really, it just never kind of died. There's always been like and now we have hentai, which is just like the Japanese were like, ooh, that cannot be a sci-fi with naked women. We're gonna make this a thing. And they just took that and ran with it, and apparently has made, obviously millions of dollars because it still exists. But,
Anyway.
no, it was a dark time in science fiction history, and luckily we don't make movies like that.
but that was the last thing I bumped into where it's like all that could have worked, and like you buy,
Yeah.
I had no problem with because I took it as she's planning to go. She's in the pod. She's like planning to like
Cryosleep.
put herself in suspended animation or something like that. So it's like, okay, just why don't the clothes fit? That was the
Reasons, bro.
that was the only thing.
Reasons.
That's stupid.
Final thoughts?
Bad on you, Ridley.
Score? Like a score out of like 1 to 10? Should you enjoy this film? Like
Man.
it, hate it? Recommend
I
it?
like it. I don't know that I will ever watch it again.
Okay.
I don't feel like I need to. There's nothing in it. There's not too many movies that have rewatchability for me personally. Like very few movies will I watch again. Normally, I'll watch something again just because I enjoy it, not because there's something else to be gained by the rewatch.
That's fair.
And I don't think I enjoyed it enough to rewatch it. That being said, like I've seen it twice, mainly because we were going to review it, so I had to watch it again. I don't know. Like, a lot of it is really good. I'm trying not to hold any of like the dated filmmaking aspects of it against it because like
Yeah.
okay, it's just of the time that I can't really hold that against it. It's doing the best it can at the time.
Gut reaction, just like 1 to 10. What would you score it?
8.
8? That's really good. I give it a 9.
I think 8. Yeah, I was gonna say like 7.5, but not.
I really
I
do
think I can
think
go
this
8.
this is absolutely one of the crowning achievements of kind of like cult classic science fiction movies. And Ridley Scott is really he carved a niche that really cemented this particular really a subgenre into a mainstream drama or a genre.
Yeah.
Where science fiction horrors became
Yeah.
I mean, run of the mill. There are so many of them. I don't even have to try to name names. Like everybody
Yeah.
can think of one.
Yeah, a lot of
And they're all
after this. A
inspired
lot of
by
stuff
Alien.
became horror in space.
Yes, horror in space was the new thing, and it was a great idea. It sold really well.
Yeah, it's still a good idea. It still can be done well.
Yes, I think that an over-reliance on computer graphics has dumbed down the filmmaking process significantly. I think that if you gave somebody...
I agree with that to an extent, yeah.
I think that if you gave a director... Like, I'd love to see this as just like an experience. If I was filthy rich, I would love to bankroll a movie and be like, I want somebody who's going to make a film like modern computer animation does not exist. I want you to make a film like
you want
it
to
would have been
remake
made.
Cleopatra?
No, I want to remake a film where basically
I only bring that up
pre-80s
because-
technology existed.
Cleopatra, they had to build all the sets twice.
Did they really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Cleopatra, at the time that it was made, and for a long time afterwards, was the most expensive movie.
Is that the one with
ever
Rock
made.
Hudson? I can't remember.
Cleopatra is with I can't remember her name. Elizabeth Taylor
Oh, okay.
and Rex Harrison. I believe
Rex
is in it.
Harrison, no, it's
Yeah,
not
Rock Hudson. Rex Harrison.
Thank you.
But no, I think like they had to. They built all the sets on. I forget what country they were originally shooting in, but then they had to like move locations.
But like Titanic is a
anyway.
great example. Like even in 1997, like the most sophisticated thing we had was, I mean, you had the internet, you had AOL. God, we had AOL back then. And you had, I mean, like Microsoft Paint. Like there were not. I mean, there were
Let me see.
there were expensive ways of doing computer generated animation.
it was-
but they looked terrible.
What year did The Abyss come out?
Oh, that's another James Cameron movie.
Yep.
I think that was like what 98.
It was mid to late 90s.
Yeah, something like that.
But that movie was one of the first movies that was another pioneering movie for visual effects. The
I was about to
two
bring up
gentlemen,
Titanic,
two
actually.
gentlemen that worked on The Abyss, created a little program that we now know is Photoshop.
Oh, is that really
Like
what?
the bones of what became Photoshop were created
That's
to do
legit.
the effects, the water effects in The Abyss.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I forget the name of the guys that did that.
But
yeah.
to finish my original thought, I really would like to see movies go back, and I think they will eventually because old ideas always come back. There's
Eventually
nothing
things will come
original.
back around.
It will go back to that at some point. And I feel like I'm just waiting, and I hope it's within my lifetime that we'll get to see films go back to that more props and analog, physical touch, tactile scenes that we just don't really have much anymore. And I think that's why
We do in certain films, but not as much in like the large scale
Yeah.
films. I do agree.
more indie films. I would love to see a blockbuster, not a blockbuster, but I think blockbusters are kind of dead, honestly. But
No,
I think they
don't
are.
think so.
I do. I think that the blockbuster, the definitional term of blockbuster does not exist anymore because every film is basically just a derivative knockoff of a dead
Well,
franchise.
Blockbuster does not inherently mean innovative or
No, but it is a term that applies to a specific subset of movies. And I don't think those movies are coming out anymore. I think the last blockbuster we had was Top Gun.
I'll say Top Gun like just happened.
Right. So I would say that they are nearly dead. Not all the way, but nearly dead. But I would love to see...
You only have a number of those every year anyway.
But I would love to see a major franchise, not a B movie, not a Sundance Film Festival movie. I would love to see a real movie.
Don't hate on Sundance.
I would love to see a real movie with real talent and a real budget get made with real effects, with real heart. What I mean by that is not how can we strip mine a fandom and manufacture interest based on some jump cuts and unused edits in a trailer that's 30 seconds long.
Could I direct you to any Tarantino films or any Denis Villeneuve films?
I would say Dune is not a good example.
Excluding Dune, I'm thinking his early work.
Okay. We can talk about that.
Just saying,
like maybe that's a good topic.
it
Actually, we might talk
being-
about like how
it
like
being at
modern
the
movies
forefront, maybe not so much anymore. But then again, because you're constantly referring to these things as cult classics, were they ever really in the forefront?
they are now. In hindsight, I don't think they were in the moment, but my point is that I'm trying to make is that I would love to see a film get made in the style of Alien, not science fiction in space, space horror. I mean, just the physicality of it, and science fiction. Yes, I do mean science fiction, but not necessarily horror science fiction. But
Okay.
I would love to see like that, and people go, "Oh, well, Star Wars did." No, they really didn't. They had like 3 characters in like costumes, and the rest of it was just millions of dollars spent on scenery and overblown production that couldn't get past cardboard cutouts with lines that sounded like they were phoned in. So yeah, I love this movie. It's a 9 for me. I would recommend that anybody who's a fan of classic science fiction watch it. I really do enjoy it. I own it.
It's so weird for me. Like I understand that it is. It's just so weird to call stuff from the 70s classic.
I know it does. It's the
Like, for me,
decade
classic-
that gave us disco and hippies.
It's like classic is from like the 30s to the 60s.
I know,
And like
but
70s
we're, like,
to 90s is like the.
Almost 50 years
I know.
like removed at this point. Like we're talking.
So how old
really
does something have to
long.
be considered classic? Because
I guess a modern classic from like my perspective, just being in 2022.
see, but then modern classics I expect to be post 95. It's like I just don't
guess it
fit
just would
the
depend on
genre
who
of
you ask.
classic for me at all. And that's just like it's just weird for me to label stuff in the 70s
That's
as
fair.
classics.
That's fair.
I understand it. It's just weird.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway,
Yeah, I think that brings it to
Yeah,
a close. We
8 for
both
me.
really like this movie. It's a good one. You should watch it.
yeah, if
Absolutely
you
give a
haven't
watch.
seen it, it's definitely worth a watch at least once.
And if you don't enjoy it, if you watch it and come back and you've seen this video and you hated this movie, please let us know in the comments below. But anyway, that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please leave us a like and a subscribe. It really helps us to overcome that YouTube algorithm and helps us to move up in the searches. And if you would share it with the people you know that would enjoy it, we'd really appreciate that as well. And Jeremiah?
And if you are listening to us over on Spotify, thank you very much. If you could give us a rating and follow us over there, that helps out a great deal as well. And we'll see you next time.
Later.